Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Path of Exile 2 video, and today we are going over the new class getting added into Path of Exile 2, the Huntress, as well as all of the new Ascendancies. If you did not know, Path of Exile 2 just did a 3-hour live stream where they showed off all of the changes happening for the new kind of season or the point 2 content drop. There's a ton of stuff to break down. I did want to make this video specifically talking about the new class and the new Ascendancies. After the live stream ended, we got all of the Ascendancy nodes, and so there's a ton of things that they didn't reveal in the live stream to talk about here, but I also wanted to show off the new class, so we're going to be focusing on that in this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get right into it. So for those of you that might have missed the live stream reveal, just a quick recap on the new Huntress. The Huntress is going to be a new class. It's coming with 2 new Ascendancies, and they're going to be a dexterous and fast class that focuses on both melee and ranged combats. They bring with them a new weapon type, which is going to be the spear, which is both a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. You can both stab with the spear and also throw it, and there's going to be different skills for using both of those abilities. Showing on screen right now is a new melee ability that you can hit an enemy and basically create this whirlwind that does constant damage and blinds enemies, but as soon as you leave the whirlwind, it explodes. They also showed off this tornado skill, which you can cast at range. It seeks out enemies and hits them, but there's a combo with this character that if you cast the whirlwind or the tornado through the whirlwind, it basically multiplies it and destroys the whirlwind, but you can get these combos where you're going to be meleeing to place your whirlwind down and then casting tornado through it to exponentially increase your tornadoes. They also showed off a new weapon type or shield type, which is the buckler shield, which is also coming with the Huntress, which allows you to parry enemies. Parry's a bit weird in a game like this because it's not a Souls-like, but basically this allows you to kind of hold down a block button, and if an enemy hits you while you're holding it down, you parry them, which allows you to then do a big follow-up attack and explode enemies, and also get frenzy charges. And they're showing off here that if you hold it down for too long, you can kind of exhaust yourself. But it's going to be able to kind of have a offensive defensive playstyle. And they mentioned that there's going to be more combos, or this character is going to be more combo heavy than even the monk. It's going to be the most combo focused character. And they showed off a bunch of skills such as throwing lightning javelins, throwing fire exploding javelins, and a lot of these skills also had extra benefits if they were used with consuming frenzy charges. So if you're parrying and then throwing the spear after you got a frenzy charge, it went from a small fire explosion to a much larger one. In addition to having a bunch of elemental damage attacks, they also showed off that the Huntress is also going to have a lot of bleed abilities, such as a rake ability, which bleeds basically everything in front of you. There was bleed spears that you could do. I think they said this character was coming with either 22 to 25 new skills. In addition to that, they're adding over or about 100 new support gems. So there's be a ton of ways to play, but as well as this new character coming. For example, you could play with a new javelin and play that on Deadeye. So you could go a lightning Deadeye using the new spear and the new skills. So just adding the new character and all these new skills and new supports is going to open up a ton for build possibility. This is the full skill list for the Huntress. Starting out, you get Disengage, Whirling Slash, Twister, and Explosive Spear. Then you can level up to get Spear Field, which looks like a massive onslaught of spears, Lightning Spear, Fangs of Frost, and Rake, which was the big bleed skill. Barrage is the buff from Deadeye that lets you use your abilities multiple times, especially if you have frenzy charges. Rapid Assault also looks like a bunch of spear attacks. Storm Lance. Then there's Sniper's Mark, Blood Hunt, which is the bleed spear, Glacial Lance, Primal Strags, Thunderous Leap, Bloodhound Mark, Tame Beast, Whirlwind Lance, which looks very interesting, Elemental Sundering, and then your final skills are Wind Serpent's Fury and Spear of Solaris. The Spear of Solaris kind of looks like a Hammer of Dawn, where you throw the spear down and a massive ray of light comes down from the sky to incinerate or kill the things that it's under. And the Wind Serpent's Fury looks like a poison skill, which is very interesting considering the fact that nothing else in their entire kit is poison or a poison skill. But it looks like from the Ascendancies, For the Huntress, they get a bunch of synergy with getting crit chance and also getting flat added physical damage, and poison can scale off of both crit and added fizz. So they could make for a pretty interesting poison character, but you wouldn't be able to start really building that until like way later. But for the Huntress's Ascensions, she's going to be launching with 2. The first one is the Amazon Ascension. I'll like move my camera around so that you can see everything. But there's some pretty crazy things going on for this Ascendancy. The first one is we're going to go from like left all the way over to the right. The first one is Critical Strike. Chance to hit with attacks can exceed 100%, and you gain additional crit chance equal to 25% of your excess chance to hit with attacks. Basically, what this means is you can grab a ton of accuracy, and that accuracy will spill over and give you increased crit chance. So you're really incentivized to stack a bunch of accuracy, which is even further incentivized with Penetrate, which attacks using your weapons have added fizz damage equal to 25% of the accuracy rating on the weapon. So once again, more reasons to grab up a bunch of accuracy and a weapon with a bunch of accuracy to get even more added damage on it, and then even more crit chance, which is pretty crazy. Down the middle, we've got Predatory Instinct, which reveals weaknesses against rare and unique enemies, and then you get a 50% increased damage against enemies with an open weakness. In the video that they showed off of this, it looks like a weakness is basically a segment on a health bar. So there's going to be let's say a boss has 100% health, 50% of that health bar might have weaknesses. So you're dealing 25% more damage cumulative to them. But if you're using big burst skills or setting up big combos, you could do those combos in those weakness windows and just obliterate bosses. And then to pair with that, there's In for the Kill, which gives you 20% increased movement speed while an enemy with an open weakness is in your presence. So basically, against unique and rares, and 40% increased skill speed while an enemy with an open weakness is in your presence. 40% skill speed is 40% increased attack and cast speed, which is just absolutely bonkers. So that is all looking really strong. And then up on this more right side, we're starting with increased evasion rating and then elemental infusion. Whenever you consume a power, endurance, or frenzy charge, you gain a stack of infusion, either cold, fire, or lightning. And these infusions of these fire, lightning, and cold allow your projectiles to explode in elemental damage. And then with infused avatar, you have a 50% chance for your infusions to not be consumed when infusing a projectile. So more of your projectiles will cause more explosions. For elemental Javazon, this seems really cool. You'd have to find a way to generate a bunch of charges, but if you do, such as using the parry, you could just get elemental explosions on a lot of your projectiles. On the right side is where things don't look quite as good for this Ascendancy. Over here, we've got Life Leech, which is increased amount of life leeched, and then Mystic Harvest. Life Leech recovers based on your elemental damage as well as fizz, so you can leech off of elemental damage. Unfortunately, in the current state of the game, leech is not super great, but once again, we're getting a huge balance patch, so that might change. This could be a good skill, but just as of now, not all that impressive. There's also Stalking Panther, which your evasion rating from your equipped helmet, gloves, and body armor is doubled, but your evasion rating from your equipped body armor is halved. This is also a really powerful node because you probably just don't wear a evasion body armor. You would just wear an energy shield body armor, and then you could get a bunch of extra evasion from your helmet, gloves, and boots, which is really cool. And then there's this node, Flask Recovery, which you get more recovery from your flask. And as Mary Brew, Life Flask also recover mana. Mana Flask also recover life. Currently, I also don't think that's all that interesting. But, this Ascendancy has a lot of cool things going for it. The next Ascendancy for the Huntress is the Ritualist, which offers quite a bit of interesting things. To start on this left side of the tree, you have to pick one negative. Either you get 15% minus to all res, 25% reduced spirit, or 30% reduced max mana, but you get Unfurled Finger, which gives you +1 ring slots, so you can wear 3 rings, which is kind of crazy, especially with how powerful your rings can be at endgame. And then you get 3% increased attributes, and then Mystic Attunement allows you to get 25% increased bonuses gained from your equipped rings and amulets, which if you're wearing 3 rings and an amulet, 25% increase on all of them is really great. Plus, You know, you could wear something like an Ingenuity to get even more benefits from all of your rings. Could be really potent for like endgame stuff. Obviously, this is only quite as strong as your jewelry is strong, but if you get really good jewelry, I could see this being quite good for endgame. Next, there's the Wildwood Persistence, which gives you 5% increased life recovery rate per 5% missing life. There's also the node for Intricate Sigils, which gives you +1 charm slots, 20% more charm charges gained, with Mind Phylacteries, which can instead consume 25% of your max mana to trigger charms with insufficient charges. They are making some changes to charms. They've been pretty useless, but in this new update, they're going to be adding like legendary charms. One that we saw was a charm that whenever you would like be burned or get burning on yourself, you would trigger a fire nova. And so I don't think this is going to be all that useful, but there's like potentially builds where, for example, you'd be like self-igniting yourself to constantly proc like fire novas from your charm that would be using your mana rather than your charms things. So that could be potentially interesting, but like really depends on how strong those charms are. And then we've got some other nodes such as the Whisper asks, which gives you Ritual Sacrifice. Basically, Ritual Sacrifice is kind of like a headhunter where you can sacrifice a mob that has died to get one of its modifiers and then use that as a buff for yourself. And then as the Whisper demands, Ritual Sacrifice can now be used on yourself to remove 25% of your max life to grant a random monster modifier. A maximum of 1 modifier can be granted this way. So more ways to like kind of buff yourself up with some crazy monster buffs. There's a lot of monster modifiers that they can roll. And then lastly, there's Corrupted Life Force, which gives you Blood Boil. Blood Boil basically gives you an area of effect aura, which applies blood boils to enemies. And then when enemies die with Blood Boil, which like builds up on enemies every like 1.52 seconds, it's going to inflict surrounding enemies with Corrupted Blood. Corrupted Blood does 2% of their max HP per second as damage over time. I'm not sure if it can stack, but that's potentially like at 10 stacks, like 20% of their max HP is dots on all the surrounding enemies, and it's just like a passive thing that you don't really need to like specifically build into. Could be really neat for like bleed builds. The next ascendancy is the Lich. This is for the Witch class that comes with a ton of pretty crazy things. Whereas the like kind of like Blood Mage was all about like sacrificing and using health and things. This is a lot about sacrificing mana and energy shield for tons of different buffs and increases. To start, you can get the Crystalline Phylactery, which allows you to socket a non-unique basic jewel, which gives you a 100% increased effect of socketed jewels, but 50% more mana cost if you have no energy shield. You could get things that like increase your damage, your area of effect, your like lightning damage, whatever you want to use. Most likely with this is going to be chaos, but it seems pretty cool there. Then on the Far Life side, there is all about the Unholy Might. This is Necromantic Conduit. You and your allies in your presence have Unholy Might. While you're not on low mana, you lose 5% of your mana per second, but Unholy Might grants you a buff that gives you 30% of all of your damage as extra chaos damage. I believe that these two are swapped and that Blackened Heart is supposed to be over here, but the next node gives you 4% increased magnitude of Unholy Might buff. You grant per 100 max mana, so you're going to be stacking up extra mana to get that Unholy Might to be way more than 30% of all damage as extra chaos, which seems pretty crazy. My favorite node for this ascendancy is right here, the Ruptured the Soul. Ruptured the Soul gives you cursed enemies killed by you or your allies in your presence have a 33% chance to explode, dealing a quarter of their max life as chaos damage. 33% chance to explode and a quarter of their max life as chaos. They're both two ridiculous stats, especially with like pack density. You're shooting into a pack. This is basically going to be guaranteed every single time and will just lead to chain explosions. I feel like for clear speed, this is going to be like an absolute must have. And then as you follow it down, you get increased effect of your curses for area of effect. And then also most likely the Dominion over Flesh, which you can apply an additional curse, and your curses can affect hexproof enemies. So you basically get Whisper of Doom for free in your Ascendancy. And then on the right side here, We've got the Price of Power. Non-channeling spells consume power charges to deal 25% more damage. And the node before that is you get 30% increased energy shield if you've consumed a power charge. And then on the far right, we've got Soulless Form, which basically 10% of your damage taken bypasses energy shield. You don't get any inherent mana regen, but you regenerate mana equal to 6% of your max life per second. Then you get increased max life, and then you get this node, which seems like it could be kind of insane, which is Eternal Life. Your life cannot change while you have energy shield. So as long as you have energy shield, the like 10% of damage bypassing doesn't do anything. And there's like Adziri's helmet that also makes damage bypass energy shield, but also gives you more energy shield. I think this would work both ways, but it could be really interesting as a survivability tool. I don't think you could heal your max life as well. But it doesn't sound like enemies could damage it. So as long as you can keep up and sustain your energy shield, you could become quite tanky, potentially. Sounds really, really interesting. And then we moved on to our next Ascendancy. So this is the Smith of Katava for the Warrior. It basically revolves around the like fantasy of being a blacksmith that can create your own armor. As well as like buff up things for your weapon and temper your weapon. So the first node here on the right is pretty interesting. Smith's Masterwork. You can only use a normal body armor. So you have to use like a white rarity body armor with no affixes on it. But you get to basically pick these nodes to craft your own body armor. So you can get like 75% lightning res or 25% increased strength, or your body armor applies to chaos damage taken from hits. Lots of cool things. And because this node doesn't cost anything, basically you get to pick 2 of these for like 1 ascendancy point, because one of them will count as yours like small passive, and then the next one will count as your big passive. And then up on the like middle of the tree, we've got Manifest Weapon, which creates a copy of your weapon. Temper Weapon, which allows you to buff up your weapon to make all of its hits, like cause enemies to explode. And then the Fire Spell on hit, I'm assuming just whenever you hit enemies, you cast fire spells. And then you can get increases to fire damage, fire res, or melee damage. And then the nodes up here are very interesting. Coal Stoker, your modifiers to fire res also grant cold and lightning res at 50% of their value. And then your Forged in Flame modifiers to max fire res also grant max cold and lightning res. And one of the things that you could do with this Ascendancy is you could grab these nodes where there's like 75% fire res, and there's also a node that your body armor grants 5% of your max, or grants +5 to max fire res. And then with these Ascendancy nodes, that +5 max fire res would be +5 max fire, cold, and lightning. And the 75% fire res would also be like, 30 plus resistance for your cold and lightning. Would be really, really cool. Definitely be able to get some pretty good tankiness out of that. And our last Ascendancy is for the Mercenary. This Ascendancy really focuses on kind of being a support, but a support for your like ballistas and minions and totems, where you can do a lot of different things. Starting out here on the left, there's a solid plan. Your persistent buffs have 50% less reservation. And then watch how I do it. Allies in your presence gain added attack damage equal to 25% of your main hand's weapon damage. So you can basically have a bunch of like auras or be an aura bot, buffing up your teams and also giving them more damage. And your team could be other players, or they could also be your totems or ballistas. There's also nodes for banner area, which gives you more area of effect with your banners, and also the ability, whoever pays best, to place multiple banners. You've also got nodes for suppressing fire, which your projectile damage builds pin, and then right where we want them, your pinned enemies cannot perform actions. Basically, they become frozen. And so all of your projectiles that are spewing out from all of your totems and ballistas are going to be basically freezing enemies, which seems very strong. And then there is, moving up here, Polish That Gear, which gives you 100% of your armor as extra stun threshold and 100% of your evasion rating as extra ailment threshold. And then Stay Light, Use Cover. You defend with 200% of armor. Enemies have accuracy penalty against you based on distance. You get a max evade chance is 50, and your max fizz damage reduction is 50. But, you get basically 200% of your armor whenever you're taking those hits. So that seems pretty solid there. And then the nodes that interest me the most are the ones that give you increased minion damage, and then the Unleash Hell, which grants you supporting fire. This is a skill that basically, counts as a minion attack that will blanket a battlefield with artillery. It scales off of your dexterity to give more accuracy rating, and they get increased damage based off of your strength. So you can build up a bunch of strength. And then the cannons ready totems node over here, your totems have 30% more skill speed. Totems only use skills when you fire an attack projectile, and you get more totem damage. So you could like apparently have both totems firing out ballista damage, while also whenever those are happening, you could also get supporting fire to rain down projectiles, and you could make all of those projectiles from your totems and your like rain of fire all like freezing enemies. And there's some real interesting things you could do that. You could also buff up their damage by you holding a weapon with Watch How I Do It. Looks like a pretty interesting but niche ascendancy. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. This new update for Path of Exile 2 is looking crazy. My only disappointment right now is that I don't have the patch notes to start theory crafting some builds, but the amount of changes, new uniques, improvements to endgame, and quality of life just looks incredible. I really I was expecting a lot, but I wasn't expecting this much. So hats off to GGG, and I cannot wait to dive into the new season and continue to make some awesome build guides for this game. I'll catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.